Okay, so do you want to start? Should I start? What do you feel?
All right. If you have something, please go for it because I've been
Yeah.
rushing around, so I haven't looked at this yet today.
Okay, so I, of course, have a lot. I feel like sometimes I don't know. I'm just like steamrolling a bit. Okay, but
No, no. But also, just to pre-warn me, the lymph actually doesn't come up in this section, does it?
the lymph, yeah, it does
At the end?
basically the whole time. Maybe not like in the first third or
Okay. All right. Shit. Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. We can see. How we go. All right.
we start here with Hans and the dad going to Freud. And sort of this visit to Freud is yeah, it's a real like step in the uh in the progression of the case, because Freud tells little Hans some things that he really like picks up upon and really sort of elevates Freud into a person that apparently seems like he can speak to God, just like knows stuff. Um, and what we first learn is that Hans is bothered by a new thing, which will come up now throughout this whole like second, third uh, of the case, which is he's bothered by what horses were in front of their eyes and by the black around their mouths. Freud interprets this as the black around the mouth as the mustache, like his dad has a mustache. I think that's a completely wrong interpretation. I don't think that's what it's about. But sort of we will see what it is about in the text. Um, and the other thing is that Freud tells him is that he is afraid of his father precisely because he is so fond of his mother. So he's making like an yeah, Oedipal interpretation to him. Well, exactly that. He's angry with his father because he likes his mother, and like they're in what's the word for like being in conflict? Yeah, being but basically that's why sort of he's in conflict with the dad. Then, and I think this is the most important thing, also Lacan tells us this, is that Freud tells little Hand.
What page is this?
This page, the second page of 31. So
Yeah.
like our first page. Um, yeah, so Freud tells to Hans, long before he was in the world, I went on, I had known that little Hans would come, who would be so fond of his mother that he would be bound to feel afraid of his father because of it. So this small like sentence, this small thing is, I think, very important because sort of it gives little Hans the myth of sort of him, of like Freud already knowing sort of that he would come sort of before he was born. He like having sort of his existence having predated his actual existence. Sort of he, sort of there's a, in a sense, like there's a place sort of where you came from to this world. It's a kind of like biblical interpretation almost, in the sense that it is mythical. Um, and then sort of the father interrupts and says, "Why do you think I'm angry with you?" And this is something that the father will say now, like every second day. Like he will be like, "Oh, I'm not angry." Like in a certain sense, he will really try to not be the one in the position to castrate little Hans, which like Lacan really emphasizes. He's always like I don't want my child to be angry with me, scared of me. Um, this sort of goes back to the whole liberal parenting
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
that they proposed.
It's
Right.
interesting the way that you just described Freud talking about Hans before Hans was born, this like pre-existence before existence. And that really fits in with like the way Hans views the world of babies, that they already exist in boxes before they exist. Yeah.
Yeah, this is sort of why I think sort of this thing really contributes to how the phobia sort of, or the neuro. Yeah, I mean, it seems like a neurosis. Sort of how the phobia sort of evolves, how Hans questioning sort of evolves.
That's interesting as well when you just said, yeah, phobia or neurosis, because, you know, now he's compelled to look at the horses. And now, as you'll see, yeah, in this section, before it was about horses biting, now you're talking about horses' moustaches and the things around their eyes. And then later on, it will be about horses falling. Like now he's elaborating on it and playing with it, which does seem more neurotic than phobic.
I mean, yeah, I think sort of the phobia is always sort of a very ambivalent object, and we really see this in Hans. Like everything that he brings in, he's always very like, you know, at the one moment he's very afraid of it, and at the other moment he's very drawn to it. Like there's both sort of the wish to both look and not look, to both like be seen and not be seen. It's always like, you know, very contrarian. No. Yeah, contrarian sort
and
of
contradictory, same thing.
Yeah, contradictory feelings in sort of in the like most very emphasized in sort of the fear wish contradictoriness, like where you can both wish and fear something. You're both afraid of it and both wish for it.
This is kind of going in a lot of depth now, but it really reminds me of the Stephanie Swales book. And she says that the hysteric is like disgusted by the object, whereas the obsessive gets excess from pleasure from the object. So the obsessive feels guilty and like avoids it. And it's like this kind of push-pull that almost we're seeing. And it can, you know, you can kind of encapsulate it in one person as well sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, then when they leave Freud's office, like Hans says, does the professor talk to God? And like, yeah, how you know, this is sort of really this makes the biblical interpretation even not so much like it's not a stretch, like, you know, what is the guy like who talks to God? Who, I mean, that's kind of a prophet, right? Yeah. So then after the visit with Freud, the father notes that the first real improvement is to be noted. And then on like April 3rd, on the end of page 32, Hans asks the dad, "Why did you tell me that I'm fond of mommy and that's why I'm frightened when I'm fond of you?" This is interesting because this is sort of him taking up what Freud said, right? Sort of Freud told him he is fond of his mom, and that's sort of why he is afraid of the dad. And like sort of Hans, like, you know, questioning this, not in the sense of like not believing it, but sort of just like, what is, you know, asking like, what is this about? Yeah, why am I fond of mommy and frightened when I'm really fond of you? So this is sort of interesting, and like even Freud says here the little boy was displaying a really unusual degree of clarity. He was bringing to notice the fact that his love for his father was wrestling with his hostility towards him in his capacity of rival with his mother. This is sort of, you know, Freud interpreting this in like really his Oedipal terms, which is happening throughout the whole case, and in which I think is sort of inadequate. I think it's more like you see the whole time in like Hans's fantasies a wish to like be with dad, travel with dad, break something with dad, go on trains with dad, and sort of in this sense, like there is an actual confusion, like because we can ask like how frightened is Hans really of the dad? How much is the dad really in a castrating position? And like Lacan tells us, well, he isn't. He's really trying to avoid this castrating position, and like he says, well, the father sort of doesn't really take up the position of castrator. So in that sense, sort of the thing that Freud told Hans is kind of missing the mark. Yeah, but sort of the myth thing, I think, is what really is sticking with him. And like Hans is really like, he's a smart kid. Like he picks up almost everything that he is told and like reuses it and like thinks about it.
Okay, yeah. So just to bring all that stuff together that you said, so it is true, like all these fantasies with the dad, you know, breaking into stuff with dad. So like, and traveling with dad. And so Lacan says this is traversing the circuit, the maternal circuit with the dad. So fantasizing that his dad will give him a route out.
Mm-hmm.
And the route out would be if he potentially was a bit more authoritative, right?
That's Lacan's,
yeah,
at least.
And it is, you know, like on the page earlier, it does say, so when the dad says when they're with Freud, like, have I ever scolded or hit you?
Mm-hmm.
And Hans says, yeah, you hit me like this morning, because Hans had like butted Hans's head into his dad's stomach. And so his dad kind of like reflexively like moved him away.
Mm.
And so like Freud thinks that these attacks of Hans to his dad is because he's scared of his dad. But Lacan instead thinks Hans is doing this to try and incite his dad to show aggression, to get him out, to give him a way out, to forbid him from his mother, to then finally like let Hans be free. So I think this part, there are like two very different interpretations.
Yeah, that's true.
It's, which one do you think you...
I'm more on the side of Lacan, but I think what Lacan is saying is still inadequate. Because there's something about like sort of seminar 4 being an early seminar of Lacan. And even though I really sort of like what Lacan does and sort of how he tries to like make sense or like teach about the sort of the maternal phallus and its position in the Oedipal evolution, Oedipal process. There is something that I'm not sure if I'm struggling with it or if I disagree with it, but I think I'm disagreeing with it, is that sort of the child is the neurosis, sort of the child is put on a neurotic path by sort of the father properly playing the role of imaginary father, of sort of being the sort of aggressive one, of being the one who, well, castrates. And I think sort of that's a bit of a, I don't know, when I think of castration, it's really, okay, so it is a interpersonal thing also, but it's really sort of also the castration of the other. And the other is, well, okay, the other's desire, but sort of it's also the castration of sort of language, of sort of the treasure trove was signifies as sort of Lacan as sort of being an incomplete space, of sort of it not being a full space. And I think sort of in this relation to language, Hans's father is really developing something with Hans that is equivalent to castration. That is sort of he's talking things through, his helping Hans, listening to Hans, speaking with Hans, making things clear to Hans, misrecognizing a lot of things that Hans is saying. Like I think this really sort of helps Hans to get a certain degree and sense of castration that I don't know if sort of just like playing sort of the imaginary father, like the aggressive father, is really enough in this. And yes, I think sort of this part is a bit underemphasized maybe by Lacan in sort of because sort of if I think like, okay, if I compare this to a real analysis in the sense of like analysis with adults, and there's an analyst and the analyst isn't a dad, actually sort of this is really like also experience from my own analysis. Like the analyst doesn't really always need to know what she or he is doing. Like there's something about sort of just like somebody listening to you and sort of even sort of misrecognizing what you're saying that like really gets your process going.
Mm-hmm.
Like you work with it. You work with what you're given, and sort of a good interpretation is always also a nice thing. It's nice when sort of somebody really like is able to like pinpoint something and say it in a sense that you couldn't have said it. But even sort of when they say it in a wrong sense, where you say like, that's not how I would say it, that's sort of not my language, that is kind of missing the mark. Even then sort of I think just like the presence or like the engagement itself is fuel to your unconscious process. And sort of this is why I think that there is really something in what the dad is doing that Lacan misses when he says, well, he just didn't really play his part as imaginary father, as castrating father. Yeah.
Okay, is this what you're saying? Maybe I'm riffing too much off it, but sure, having the authority of the dad forbidding you from the mom gives you this really simplistic way out. But like, as you said, Hans is like really inquisitive. And maybe that would have never been enough for him anyway.
Yeah, that's
right?
kind of what I'm thinking. Because like Hans has a question. The question is like he's questioning basically like, what is the Willa? Why do women apparently don't have it? And like he's like covering this over, but sort of like there is sort of the whole question, like this he constantly questions this. But sort of the other question is, and I think this is a really important question, like Lacan says in the very last chapter, well, the whole time what was really important is sort of that Hans is like thinking about the stomach and like where do babies come from. And I kind of like I alluded to this throughout the whole seminar, but like, why only allude to this? Like, this is the important question.
Mm-hmm.
Where do babies come from is the important question for Hans. And why was I starting to say this? Shit, I don't remember.
Like Hans being inquisitive and
yeah, right. How would the authority of the father answer this question? Like if you would just like put his foot down, be like, I'm, I don't know how, like, I don't know, be a more like authoritative father. Like how would that really help with the questioning when what is at stake is a question?
Although the only retort to that slightly is throughout, it does seem like the role of a father in like, making a baby is downplayed a lot.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what's missing.
Yeah, that's true. I just think that's a bit different from like being an imaginary authoritative father. Like I think that's correct. Maybe sort of this is what Lacan is saying. This is what sort of why I'm saying, well, maybe I'm actually sort of not so much maybe not in disagreement, but like I don't really get what he's saying. But to me, it sounds like he's saying, well, you need a father who sort of annuls the mother's desire through his authoritativeness. And I think like, well, that's not really enough. And I don't think like you can avoid perversion by a dad who is authoritative. I'm specifically thinking sort of Kafka here, where there's a letter to like really beautiful, like where sort of Kafka really sort of tries to um, say everything sort of that was important and everything that bothered him with in his relation to his dad. And basically says, well, he was always so strong, so he seems so unreachable, so far away, so powerful, sort of, that I could never be like really in rivalry with him. And I think sort of
like impenetrable.
Yeah, impenetrable. And to me, sort of this is also like, I'm not saying like Kafka was perverse, but sort of I'm saying like this is also like, I think, a road that can also lead to perversion. Like if you just have a dad who like seems impenetrable, that precisely what is lacking is sort of the symbolic aspect of the authority. Like it seems like you have just, well, sort of this all-encompassing persecutory entity of like, and sort of this does play out in Kafka's novels. Like you just have the law and the court, and like they're just following you and following you, but there's no meaning to what they're doing. Like sort of there's something symbolically lacking in Kafka's stories, in all of them. Yeah, so sort of this is why I'm thinking like, okay, sort of the dad of Kafka, as you can see in his letter, like really played the part of the authoritative father. But I think, well, there's something else that sort of was lacking, that is precisely sort of the lack of the other, the lack of the paternal other in that instance.
Yeah.
I think Kafka is usually read as an obsessive neurotic. If you want to read it like that, I think it's always like a bit, it's a bit cheap to like just diagnose someone. But yeah, sort of that's basically where my suspicion sort of comes from, because I'm thinking, well, that if the step from perversion to neurosis, or like, is basically like being able to perceive the sort of lack in the second other, then if this pathway sort of is not opened by authoritative people, then sort of you will have to make something of yourself. And sort of that's basically sort of perversion, this like making something of yourself. Wherein sort of, this is Stephanie Swales also saying this a lot, like saying like, well, the sort of the other also has to make clear that sort of there are laws that also regulate him or her, like sort of in a sort of moral sense, maybe like there are laws that I'm following, but sort of these laws are not my laws. They're the laws, of sort of the symbolic, the social, yeah. Okay.
Just quickly, like, because I feel like in this scenario of Hams, the mother is the kind of authoritative, non-lacking, overwhelming being. And, I think she has authority over the house, and I don't think the father and the mother are getting on well, and the father's just kind of doing his own thing and being overruled potentially by the mother. And so I guess the issue is, how does Hans find the lack in the mother, right?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. But sort of in a certain sense, he has already found the lack in the mother. Like, sort of in the sense of, well, he kind of knows that she's lacking the phallus.
Oh yeah, and at first disavows this, yeah, and is exploring this. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's true. He does know, and the whole point is a little bit of an exploration of that. But
there's, of course, sort of, this is only sort of the sort of first. It always needs to be doubled. Like there needs to be a double, like castration in my. I don't know if Lacan ever like really says this, if I really have it from Lacan, but sort of I think this comes from my engagement with Lacan, and the whole retroactivity thing is sort of that. To me, it seems like castration always needs to be doubly happening. And sort of Hans is sort of it like happened the first time in the sense of like him realizing, well, sort of basically, well, the maternal phallus doesn't exist, but sort of then the second thing, sort of the retroactive quilting of sort of this first gap opening is in neurosis sort of is somehow like provided by the law of the father. And sort of this is kind of missing now or this is the journey that Hans finds himself on. And then Lacan will tell us at the end, well, sort of he will double the mother, and so we can get there when we read that again.
Okay, that was very useful. I like that. That was good. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I may have to say that so I'm still figuring this out. Like I'm still like sort of what the name of the father, how it really works, what sort of this step from perversion to neurosis, like what it looks like. I'm still like this is what I'm giving you here, sort of what I grasp so far. I'm not sure if this really is if this is sort of really what Lacan is really telling us, because I think really what he's telling us about the Oedipus complex is more like in the neurotic sense. He really draws that out in Seminar 5 and 6, and I haven't read those yet. So yeah, sort of this is what I can get now.
But where I'm at now, I was trying to explain to my boyfriend the solution of Hans, and I just couldn't. Like, I'd have a really bad understanding. And I do like what you just said here, because I do want like this, like doubling, it's not enough to do something once. Just in general, I think it's quite an intuitive rule. But it's nice you adding the keywords like quilting, etc. And so I do like this. First, absence of maternal phallus. Second, law of the father. This is nice. Okay, Hans does something else. Doubling mother, I still don't understand it, but I like just this idea of doing things a few times. That's nice. Yeah, so let's keep exploring, and hopefully we can just add a bit more, because I do have such a poor understanding. I know it's very idiosyncratic how everyone traverses the Oedipal complex. Mm-hmm. Everyone finds their own way out, their own path. It's completely dependent on the context. But still, like, I just don't understand really what Lacan is saying. And maybe I'll see, because I don't even know what Freud says, but let's see. Yeah, I hope I get a better understanding of that. Yeah, where are you at? Like, I'm just noticing at the end of like 33,
yeah,
Hans saying like, "Daddy, don't trot away from me," like saying "Daddy," like I feel like Hans is playing here, like, I mean, no one's told him that he thinks the horse is that. Freud thinks the horse is the dad. I mean, anyone's told him that, but he is clever. And I mean, this is true. Like, I think he's just playing along now with what he's been told.
Yeah, but I mean, that is also sometimes, yeah,
well, I mean, Lacan does say the horse signifies the mother, the father, Hans himself, many things. So
yeah, just think sort of that Hans is laughing because like the dad is making an interpretation. That interpretation kind of like hit the spot.
Okay.
Like, because he says trot, and like then the daddy is like, oh, trot like a horse, and then Hans is laughing because like that is kind of it's kind of true.
Mm-hmm. After this, Freud says, we know that this portion of Hans' anxiety has two constituents: fear of his father, which obviously Lacan thinks is not true, and fear for his father.
Mm-hmm.
This fear for his father is from the conflict between Hans' affection and his hostility.
Yeah.
So neither of these really pick up on what Lacan says, which is the fear that he cannot fear his father, right?
Yeah.
So there's many things that could be going on. Yeah.
By the way, I am checking the German because
Mm.
so in the German is Hans is saying, "Daddy, don't run away from me." He doesn't say trot.
Oh,
And then the father notes, "Oh, it's interesting that he says running instead of walking." And
what? That's completely different.
yeah, that's completely different. This translation is sometimes bad. Um, and then
That's like a falsification.
yeah, that's a falsification. And then, but it is
But yeah, it's still,
it's in accordance with what the father interprets.
yeah.
And then yeah, he says, "Oh, you're afraid that the horse is running away from you," and then he's laughing. So I think even in that sense, like the interpretation even hit more because it's really like an interpretation.
So yeah, it feels like a bit of a
But
reach.
the dad doesn't sort of really pick up upon what Hans is saying, but it's like really like he's connecting the dots. I think this is why what could be more beneficial even here. Here's something on the next page on 34 is the dad says, "In the summer, I used to be constantly leaving for Gmunden, for Vienna on business, and he was then the father, that is Hans. You will remember that his fear of horses is connected with the episode at Gmunden when a horse was to take Lizzie's luggage to the station." I think this is insofar interesting as sort of he notes that Hans is starts being very affectionate towards his mother, precisely in this time in Gmunden when he's constantly leaving. And sort of then also sort of this was the horse, and sort of he has this friend Lizzie who was taking the luggage to the station. Again, like we have already what we will see later on, something like a package, a luggage, something being transported, which Hans will show great interest in. Then on the next page, 35, at the bottom of the page, he says, the father says, "I asked at the time why he was so much afraid, that is afraid of horses that carry things in carts. And he says, I'm afraid the horses will fall down when the cart turns. He's equally frightened when the carts standing at the loading dock start moving in order to drive off. Further, he is more frightened of large dray horses than small horses. And he's afraid when they drive by quickly rather than slowly. To me, this is the beginning of many different distinctions that Hans is making in what he's afraid of and what he's not afraid of. And what he's afraid of is always the more uncontrollable version of that which he's afraid of. He's more afraid of large horses than small horses. He's more afraid of fast horses than slow horses. He's more, And this
afraid of horses with big carts than small carts. Yeah.
And then this will continue. Like he will be afraid of loud noises. He will be afraid of big bathtubs. And so on. Like always the thing where he won't be afraid sort of the small circuit, but be afraid more of the large circuit of the trains that leave from the house. Like, at some points he says, well, I'm not so afraid of being carried away with the cart because I know I can always come back. Sort of the more being afraid is like when he goes on the large journey with dad, and then he starts being afraid, like we won't get off in time or something. Yeah, this is sort of, he says it on the next page on 36. I'm afraid of standing by the cart and the cart driving off. Oh, I'm sorry. This isn't the full context.
Yeah, I think this bit is a really key part where he really is elaborating on the phobia, and it's changing quite a lot and it's becoming more and more specific. So this is talking about the horses drawing up to this kind of loading dock. And so there's loading, unloading. And Hans describes this wish of, I get it, to me, tell me if I'm wrong, like it seems he wants to jump onto like the cart so he can get off and then get onto the loading dock.
Yeah.
Because what separates him and the loading dock is the horse and cart.
Mhm.
And again, I mean, this is such a common fear. Like when you're a kid, like even if you like get on a train to say goodbye to someone, you think the train is going to go off without you. And so he thinks if he gets on the horse and cart, it will drive off before he gets a chance to literally traverse it. And so, yeah, to me, this does seem, we've been talking about like the mother and the circuit around the mother, and he's trying to traverse it. And it's true, he does say, oh, it's like, yeah, maybe is it here? He also says, the dad says, maybe not here. Are you scared of it? Like running off and you won't be able to come home anymore. Oh, no, he does say here, no, I'm not scared because I can always come back.
Yeah.
Always come back to mummy.
Come back to mommy, right? He wasn't asked about mommy.
Huh?
He wasn't asked about mommy. Like, oh, I can always come back to mommy. Like, this is sort of interesting because, like, why, he inserts that there. Like, the dad doesn't come back. He asks, won't come back home. And he says, well, come back home to mommy. He's also there, the dad. He's also at home.
It's okay, so it's true. So, because to me, it is this fear. It seems initially like this fear of not being able to traverse the circuit of the mum, basically not be able to get away from the mum. Is that true if he's still saying, oh, it's fine, I can always come back? Because the fear is that he can't escape. But there was also this second part that I think Lacan was saying where he's just scared of like all his system of signifiers being completely overturned by the mum and just this whole new world beginning. So I don't know, am I going too far with that part?
I think sort of I think that's correct, but sort of it's the flip side. Like the flip side of always being able to come back is sort of the fear of not being able to properly leave.
Yeah, I like that.
And sort of this is sort of the unconscious part of it. And sort of the why are you afraid of not being able to leave is sort of maybe, well, we will figure that out, but sort of there is something about sort of being the fear of sort of being of the signifying system being eclipsed again. And I think that is something that really, like in this third of the decade, is really sort of coming to the fore without being explicit or easily spottable, because it's always questioning. It's the question about shitting and eating, and like I think shitting and eating is connected to like a question, but sort of I don't have evidence of this because the evidence is later on in the case. Is sort of the question of eating and shitting is related to like how does the baby get into the stomach? And no, you go first.
I think so. I think this is me really pushing it. But I thought it was interesting that he says to the dad. So he's talking about climbing onto the carts to get onto the loading dock, and he says to the dad, "Do you know who I learnt the climbing about from? Some boys." Maybe that's totally normal, but maybe Freud would say that he's not able to learn how to traverse the circuit from his dad.
Some boys.
Just some boys. Just some street boys.
Yeah, I think more that interesting. Yeah. No, I think sort of this is I think here's sort of interesting that he says, well, I should like to load and unload the boxes. I should climb about the boxes there. Sort of like it's like the interesting object is the box, and the loading and unloading of the box. and sort of he's he's drawn to the box, but sort of again he's afraid of really going to the box. It's again sort of the fear wish duality there at play.
Yeah, no, I thought that was interesting. Yeah, he says, do you know why I should like to go there? Because I should like to load and unload boxes. And that does seem to be related later on, maybe not now, to the pregnancy, this obsession with babies come in boxes. And I want to understand it, and I want to do it. And how do I do it? I think this is how I do it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is sort of
maybe it's not there yet.
I think what I'm doing now is sort of an over-interpretation, but like at the big, like when his little sister was born, there was a doctor that came with a bag, and sort of Hans showing interest in that bag. And sort of, I think this, yeah, again, it's a bit of an over-interpretation, but to me, like that speaks to the whole questioning of like boxes, bags, things that are, you know, basically things where you could like put a baby in and bring it over.
Yeah. But then it's really sad because Hans has this like grand idea to go out so he can do this that day and get on the box, but then he gets scared. Which, you know, I just think it's more symbolic of him trying to figure stuff out, and it's just not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. The next part they talk about the moustache, which when are you going to speak about what you think the moustache around the horse's mouth means? Because I don't know what it means.
Oh yeah. So page 38. The dad asks, which horses are you actually most afraid of? Hans says, all of them. The dad says, that's not true. Hans, I'm most afraid of horses with a thing on their mouths. This is interesting because at first he said, I don't remember if he said it or the dad said it, that sort of he's afraid of the thing before the eyes and mouth of the horses. And now he says in front of the mouth. So maybe like the mouth is more important than the eyes here. Okay.
Yeah.
Then, okay, he says they have something black on their mouths. And then the dad says, what, a mustache perhaps? And Hans laughing, oh no. I think in this instance, he's laughing not because it's correct, but because it's incorrect. Like it's not about the mustache.
Okay.
And then he also says, well, I'm more afraid of furniture vans. And then Hans, I think when furniture horses are dragging a heavy van, they fall down. Like at the end of the page, the dad asks, what did you think when the horse fell down? And Hans says, now it'll always be like this. All horses in buses fall down. So this is interesting because to me, there's something about, you know, Hans questioning about like how he says, well, I'm afraid of the white horses to bite, but then like then he eventually comes to terms, says, sort of not all white horses bite, but sort of he says like, at this moment, I thought all horses will now always fall down. Sort of just like in a sense of like, there's a real completeness to this feeling or rupture that we can spot here in this world. Yeah, they will always fall down. There are no exceptions.
I know, like, it's not true, but doesn't it sound like the rules of sexuation, you know?
Yeah. I was thinking of that. I mean, maybe it does sound like that because I just use those words.
I thought it when I was reading it, but I think I think it could be, related, but I guess he's making these rules. I think that it'll always be like this. Made me really sad when I read it because I just think he feels trapped. And then when he's starting to make exceptions, I think that's him trying to build roots through, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sort of the all does stand for like a real, a full rupture, like different than before when he was told like, well, if you don't stop playing with your penis, I will send the doctor and he will cut it off, as a threat from the mother. And he said, well, I can just whittle with my bottom. Like, here it's not like, well, some forces fall down, but like zebras don't or something. I don't know. There's sort of no alternative left open here at that point, which I think is relevant. Like there's a real change happening sort of in Hans' symbolic order that is expressed by this.
Yeah, so it is strange. So at this point, so now he's brought in the horses falling down as a part of his fear. So it began with the biting, and now it's moved that horses will bite you, and now it's moved to him being scared that horses will fall down.
Yeah.
And it's strange that he's made the exception for the biting, right, already, that not all white horses bite. Yeah? Has he said that now?
Maybe he will say it on the next pages. I think he already said that.
No, I think he must have already said it.
Yeah, he already said that.
Yeah. But now he said, so he's kind of come through the biting part, but now with the falling, he's like, it's unclear about what he feels right now, because he says when he first saw the horse fall, he thought, all horses will fall now. I think now it's undecided whether he thinks it's all or not.
Yeah, that's good. That's true. Yeah, and then the dad asks, like, you had your nonsense already at that time, and Hans says, no, I only got it then. When the horse and the bus fell down, it gave me such a fright, really. That's when I got the nonsense.
Was that the second time when he went out with his mum or not? This episode they're talking about when he's gone out to buy a waistcoat with his mum, is that second time, yeah? After he got fearful when he went out with the maid, okay.
Yeah. No, when he was in the town with his mom.
So, because at the start, he goes out with the maid, he gets fearful there's no phobic object, then he goes out with the mother, and then he decides it's the horse. Yeah. Are they speaking back about that time?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, he says that, and then sort of the dad asks, well, what is it, biting or falling down? And Hans says, well, it's falling down and biting. And then, why does it give you such a fright? Hans says, because the horse went like this with its feet. It made a row with its feet. So it started like kicking with the feet. Where did you go with mommy that day? And he said, well, first to the skating rink, then to a cafe, then to buy a waistcoat, then to a pastry cook. Then we went to the Stadtpark. This is the day when Hans like first said that he was afraid of horses. In January 8th, in the case, is it? And then the dad asks, was the horse dead when it fell down? And then Hans says yes. And the dad asks, how do you know that? Because I saw it. He laughed. No, it wasn't a bit dead. Okay, this signal, that's the wrong question. Like, it's not about the horse being dead or not, which goes against Freud's and the dad's reading of sort of this being a wish by Hans for the dad to die.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see that either. Although I agree the horse signifies many things, I think I often view it more as the mother, to be honest, and the relationship with the mother. So yeah, I don't agree that this is a wish to see the dad dead. I guess we didn't speak about it last time, but while I was reading this, I was thinking about why was it biting and now it's falling? I mean, I think it's both, but it did remind me, we spoke about this before. Why would it be biting? And this like refers back to some of Lacan's theories about when you are first, I guess, noticing this separation from your mum. Well, not actually separation, when you're first noticing the absences from your mother. Mm-hmm. And, this can be quite distressing. You are a little baby. You don't understand what orders her presence and her absence, what is responsible for it. What are you doing wrong? What does she want? Why is she not there all the time? And Lacan spoke about like the breast being like the only thing in the real that can kind of compensate for this absence. And like you bite it and it's like a comfort because it's there. But also, I think I do think I overinterpret some of this stuff, as we said before. But so the biting is like a comfort, but it is also potentially like a bit of like aggression towards the absence of the mother that you are experiencing. And so biting becomes this like quite important thing in this dynamic. And Lacan says that potentially when you then decide to move away from your mother, you fear that she will bite you because you did that to her and you think this cycle will come back on you. And so this could be why he fears the horse biting. And then when we think about the fall, here Freud is saying he thinks it's the dad falling, the dad being dead because that's what Hans wishes. But instead, I always saw it as Hans falling, because his mother won't, I guess, let him go.
I think all of that is definitely sort of at play also in this case. I wouldn't interpret the biting like that. But I don't think sort of that what you just said sort of isn't here. I just think sort of the particular significance that Hans gives to biting is a different one.
Which what we'll explore later with the eating and shitting later.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. We'll see. Okay.
So Freud summarizes here on page 40. His father's investigations may have been without success at some points, but it does no harm to make acquaintance at close quarters with a phobia of this sort, which we may feel inclined to name after its new objects. For in this way we get to see how diffuse it really is. It extends onto horses and onto carts, onto the fact that horses fall down and that they bite, onto horses of a particular character, onto carts that are heavily loaded. So I just think that's a good little summary of sort of what Hans is afraid of, what the phobic objects are at this moment for him. Then on the next page, the dad tells us, for some time, Hans has been playing horses in his room. He trots about, falls down, kicks about with his feet and neighs. Once he tied a small bag on like a nose bag. What is the nose bag?
What they eat from?
He has repeatedly run up to me and bitten me. Which is really funny. So we see sort of again like Hans being afraid of the horses, but also very much sort of when he's sort of in a safe environment, like he just plays being the horse also. Like there's really just like general grappling sort of with the situation, like always both feared and attracted, both sort of, always trying to like kind of integrate this problem that he has. And then on April 6th, same page, if the page we were reading was 41. Yeah. The dad says, I asked him if the black reminded him of a mustache, and he said only by its color. So I do not yet know what it really is. This is sort of at the bottom of page 41. On the bottom of the first page of page 41. So this is interesting because sort of, the mustache interpretation again, it comes from Freud, and Hans says, well, it's only by color. Like it's not really the mustache. It's sort of only the color that I'm interested in, and the color is black.
Okay.
And then here at these days, on April 6th, like the dad reports like the fear being diminished. On April 7th, he also says Hans' improvement is constant. So here we find a period of sort of Hans phobia sort of decreasing in extent and like gravity. Then on April 9th, this is page 42, the dad writes, "This morning Hans came to me while I was washing and bare to the waist. Hans said, 'Daddy, you are so lovely. You are so white.' I said, 'Yes, like a white horse.' Then Hans says, 'The only black thing's your mustache.' Continuing, or perhaps it's a black muzzle. Muzzle?
Muzzle.
Yeah. I think sort of here we see sort of Hans really taking up the interpretation of the dad and Freud. I think he's picking them up because he's talking to the dad and Freud. It's sort of not really his own, but he's working with it again. Like he's always working with what is said to him.
Okay, and he enters the lymph.
Yeah, then here he enters the lymph thing. I told him I knew on what occasion it was that he made a row with his feet. Oh yes, he interrupted me. When I'm cross or when I have to do lymph, I would rather play. And then the dad says, well, it's true that sort of he stamps with his feet when he's angry, and doing lymph means like shitting, because there's a connection to Strumpf, which means stocking, and sort of Hans saying, well, you know, the shit sort of looks like a stocking to him. Yeah, so
the stocking shape and color.
Yeah, the shape and the color, and I think especially sort of I think material and color are what are important here. Like he will then sort of be, this is what he will pick up. He will take the blackness of
the stocking
and sort of the horse's mouthpiece, and sort of also he will show disgust of black clothing, black leather, and rowing with the feet is connected to shitting. And again, sort of like what Hans is talking about here is again something that he cannot control. Like he's playing and like he has to go through the toilet and like he gets angry. And again, sort of what is happening here is something that is uncontrollable, something, you know, like the sort of like the penis stirring that we pointed out, but sort of here now it's not that, but sort of more like I have to go to the toilet even though I don't want to. There's something again sort of that is uncontrollable to Hans. And then
that's a really good point, actually. Yeah.
Let me jump to page 43, where the dad says, I came home and was speaking to my wife, who made various purchases which she was showing me. Among them was a pair of yellow lady drawers. Hans exclaimed,
so like knickers, pants.
Yeah. What is, yeah, that's right.
The drawers. Yeah, sorry, there are just so many words in here which are not like normal, like making a row with your feet is like making a noise. It's strange. Yeah.
No, that's true, but this is also true in the German. Like, I think in the German it's also true that sort of Hans and also the family is using words that we wouldn't use like that anymore.
Yeah.
And that are also clearly like, it's the speech of a little boy. Like who just like says stuff that sound similar or make sense to him. So among them was a pair of lady drawers, knickers. Hans exclaimed, ugh, 2 or 3 times, threw himself to the ground and spat. And
he's so dramatic.
Why do you say ugh? I asked Hans. Because of the drawers. Dad, why? Because of the color, because they're yellow and reminds you of Lumpf and Whittle. This is interpretation by Dad, sort of the blackness sort of reminds him of the shit and the yellowness reminds him of pee. And then Hans says, Lumpf isn't yellow, it's white or black. this is interesting because
Oh, white as well.
yeah, like Lumpf clearly isn't white. It's also not really black, but sort of you could go more with black.
Yeah.
Um, if you look at sort of the last pages, whiteness came up also, like, with the white horse. He said, "Oh, Daddy, you're so white." Then sort of he's disgusted of the black. I'm not super sure what to make of this. I've read this now a couple of times, and I cannot really connect the white to anything. For me, it's more like another. Hans is really putting up a lot of distinctions, of like oppositions. He's making a lot of oppositions: small horses, large horses, small cards, large cards. And here again, sort of he has just another opposition that he's making of like white and black. Like Lumpf is white or black, sort of. And I don't know, sort of the blackness he focuses on, the whiteness he doesn't really focus on of things. He just, like, at some points he says, "Oh, I like mommy's white neck. Oh, Daddy, you're so white." Not all white horses bite, but sort of I think these three instances are the only ones where he's talking about whiteness, and sort of blackness is much more relevant to him. Immediately afterwards, I say, "Is it easy to do Lumpf if you eat cheese?" This is still Hans saying. So he's first saying Lumpf isn't yellow, it's white or black. Immediately afterwards, I say, "Is it easy to do Lumpf if you eat cheese?" I think this is a very important little thing that he says, that, like, this is something that really no one picks up on, not even Lacan. And like, it's interesting to me because, like, he's talking about sort of, "Well, no, Daddy, you don't understand the way I think of Lumpf, the way I think of shit." And then immediately afterwards, like, is it easier to shit if you have eaten something before? So we again sort of, or like, not again, actually, like, really for the first time here, find like Hans like connecting the question of like shitting to eating. Because actually sort of the last time I told you about it, it was very first in the text, where he says, like, he goes off to the neighboring girl and he says, "Well, I can come back to breakfast and to do number one." Like, that's a complete mistranslation, sadly. He says, he doesn't say come back to breakfast, but he says come back to drink coffee. And the second one, the doing number one, is also wrong, because I thought number one means like doing, like going to the toilet and like shitting, but apparently that means peeing, right? Number one, peeing. Yeah. He doesn't say peeing. He says to like go to the quiet place or something like this, like go to the, like, fulfill a natural need. He's using an old Viennese expression for that. So, yeah, that is, I could look it up where it is, but sort of that's for me, sort of in the English, I said, "Oh, it's eating and shitting," but it's not eating, it's drinking coffee and shitting. So
yeah, before it was eating and peeing.
Yeah.
And now it's drinking and shitting.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm not saying this because it's important. I'm just saying it's because I was misled by the English.
Damn, the interpretation is so important. Like, we're talking about words, specific words. Okay.
Yes.
He also says if you jump about a lot, can you do Lumpf easily? So not only if you eat, can you shit? He's asking if you move, can you shit?
Yeah. I haven't picked up on that. Keep it in your head.
Yeah.
See if you.
Well, because moving and transport is an important theme as well.
Yeah.
So are you kind of alluding to, if the shitting is related to the question of where do babies come from, is he kind of asking how can we promote this movement? Like, how can we ease baby? Is he just trying to understand?
Yeah, so the whole thing, it is difficult to interpret because this is a child's speech. And sort of like even Hans doesn't really know what he's really asking. So in my mind, what is happening here is the whole time of like a child trying to grasp something which like previously has not even sort of been, well, maybe sort of has been asked as a question, but like really sort of even saying like what does Hans uh what is Hans questioning? It is questioning where do babies come from. I think this is correct, but sort of we have to see that sort of something is also really getting transformed here. It's not just about like a question that is there from the very beginning and then answered at the end. It's like really sort of also like the progression of even what I'm trying to say is like he starts symbolizing here. And like what is there before he starts symbolizing? I think it's more like about like, yeah, bodily things, being connected to the mother in an imaginary way, and like only sort of with this rupture really starts this is sort of why the rupture in Lacanian psychoanalysis is so important, because it is a rupture that starts the questioning. Like, something goes wrong, basically. Like, there's um the fall from paradise, and then like you ask yourself like, what the fuck happened? Like, why did we fall? Why did things go wrong? Basically, the prime Oedipal question is like, why did things go wrong? Like something happened, and at that point it went wrong. And like you see that everywhere, like in all literature, in all philosophy, like they are always concerned with the question, like, why did things, Nietzsche, he's like, at a certain point, like there started like all of genealogy, all of his philosophical genealogy is like asking why did things went wrong. Like at a certain point it was kind of cool, and then like morality happened, and like things stopped being cool, and like how do we deal with that now? Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because it's difficult to interpret all of these things because they are sort of developed on the spot. Like they turn things that in a certain sense don't mean anything, aren't explainable, into questions that can be accessed by language. But like there's a real transformation happening here.
It's true, even on a more boring basic level, like say someone has like a breakup, it kind of like opens the seams for other things.
Yeah.
It's like not what went wrong with that, then they could start questioning their like relationship template with other people. They'll go through analysis, everything opens up,
Yeah.
So it's true, like, and obviously he's very young, he has a lot of stuff to figure out. So
yeah, right. No, but this is sort of really like this is something that people really experience. Like, something goes wrong, and then you like start questioning what the heck even happened.
yeah, but it's beyond, and it goes beyond that. It's quite shocking. Like it's not even just about that one relationship. It can open up everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is really sort of this is why the phobia is so like this is really the positive content of the phobia. This is really sort of what this trouble really opens up. This is also why, this is sort of why we cannot just say, well, we should sort of, as the parents, sort of we should just get rid of the phobia. We should like, it's really like working with the phobia. With the symptom. It's like working with the symptom rather than trying to remove symptoms.
Yeah, the symptom is meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you didn't read these parts.
Yes.
I'm thinking where a good moment to stop would be, but I don't really find it closely. So maybe we can stop with the not sort of just here in this conversation about the drawers, but sort of when the next conversation starts.
Yeah, sounds good.
This is the start of page 44, where the dad says, after luncheon, I said to him, we'll write to the professor again, and he dictated to me. When I saw the yellow drawers, I said, ugh, and that makes me spit, and threw myself down and shut my eyes and didn't look. You know, this is when we have like compulsion to look, like I need to look at the horses. Here now, not looking, not interested. I don't want to see it.
And of course that brings in the maternal phallus a bit as well. Looking, not looking, is it there, is it not? Yeah.
Yeah. The dad asks, why? Hans answers, because I saw the yellow drawers. And I did the same sort of thing with the black drawers too. The black ones are the same sort of drawers. They were only black. Relevant because he says it's about what they represent, not about the things themselves. Like it's not sort of important. Like the black ones represent the same thing as the yellow ones. Then he interrupts himself. I say, I am glad. I'm always so glad when I can write with the professor. The dad says, why did you say, ugh? Were you disgusted? Hans, yes, because I saw it. I thought I should have to do Lumpf. Yeah, then the dad just sort of questions him more about like the drawers and so on. And eventually like Hans gets frustrated. This is like on the next page on 45, on the same page where 46 starts. At this third paragraph, Hans says, I think perhaps I may have forgotten she didn't take them off. Impatiently, oh, do let me alone. Like at some point, like he gets frustrated by the dad's questioning here.
I mean, that is quite important. Like he's played along and enjoyed it up until this point. I don't know if this, I don't know what it means, but clearly this is important. Whatever that, he's basically questioning about the mum. He's like saying, you said the mum took the drawers off and went out the room and then came and put them back on again. And he asked the mum and she's like, no, why would I do that? And then the dad goes back to Hans and it's like, that's not what happened. And Hans is like, I don't know, like, I can't remember. Leave me alone.
Yeah, and Freud also says, like, I have a few comments to make at this point of the business of the drawers. It was obviously mere hypocrisy on Hans' part to pretend to be so glad of the opportunity of giving an account of the affair. In the end, he threw the mask aside and was rude to his father. It was a question of things which had once afforded him a great deal of pleasure, but of which now that repression had set in, he was very much ashamed, and at which he professed to be disgusted. He told some downright lies so as to disguise the circumstances in which he had seen his mother change her drawers. I don't think Freud is right here. I think like there is a bit of like the dad sort of doesn't really ask the right questions, but sort of it's not so much that Hans is he really telling outright lies? I don't think so. Like the dad just focuses on the wrong thing. Like he focuses on the yellowness of the pants, and then Hans says, well, she brought the yellow ones and I'd seen them before. And then the dad says, well, that's contradictory. It's more like Hans is more getting frustrated with the dad sort of asking the wrong questions, really. And isn't really telling lies here. He's just like responding wrongly.
I think, yeah, I agree with you, but I think him being upset does mean that this is important to him. Like, and I do kind of like what Freud's saying, like this was, when I say important to him, that could mean something that gave him pleasure and is now confusing.
No, I don't disagree with that part. I only disagree with the lying.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. Lying, if it is lying, is important, but it kind of just feels like, I don't know, he said something. Yeah, there's just a miscommunication and the dad's really drilling into it. And it's, I mean, he's talking about like his mom having drawers on, leaving, having drawers off. And to me, it seems to relate to this kind of question when he's with the mum of the maternal phallus, but also what's going on. Like later on, it does say that, you know, he often pesters his mum, wants to go into the toilet with her when, you know, when she's doing number 2, when she's doing lymph. So I just think this is a site of a lot of questions, no answers. He's frustrated. There are some parts which he knows maybe are forbidden, maybe not. And he has no answers, and he's like, just stop asking me.
Yeah. Yeah. This is how I see it also, yeah.
Yeah. We'll see as we go on, but in terms of the lymph and the where babies come from, yeah, because it does seem to be 2 questions. Maternal phallus, is it there? And then also babies, where do they come from? And they kind of all overlap, and it's a big mess, especially the overlap with like genitalia and where do they come from, literally. And so it does seem this kind of just a natural question of, if you think babies do come from potentially shitting, it would make sense that you would want to see what happens when your mum goes to the bathroom, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and then after this, he then is in good spirits.
You see.
Yeah, at the very bottom of the page, we went out in the front of the house. He was in very good spirits and was prancing about all the time like a horse. At this very start of 46,
Yeah.
Which is weird. Yeah.
I missed that. Yeah, I would stop here. Do you want to continue?
No, I think that sounds good. Yeah.